Hello, my name is Bruce Morrison, and I'm the Director of Architectural Design for EnviroMed Design Group. I'm a licensed architect and specialized in dental office design. Prior to the forming of EnviroMed, I worked for THE Design, a premier dental office design firm that had been in business for many years. The training I received there has been invaluable, and this has become a career I am passionate about. My hope is that with my section of this course, you will gain knowledge of some of the major aspects of planning an office, as well as specific design techniques to ensure good flow and function. First, we will talk about the overall design criteria for the dental office, which will include bubble planning zones and bubble planning. The three primary planning zones are treatment zone, public zone, and private zone. This slide shows a basic bubble plan that starts to define how the various planning zones relate to each other. The goal here is to group similar function areas together and to minimize interference between zones. It will also be helpful in arranging the operatories to take advantage of north or east orientation. The purpose of bubble planning is to establish zone relationships, identify spaces within each zone, establish staff and patient flow patterns. For bubble planning criteria, the first step is to develop a written program, which is the doctor's wish list. This is absolutely necessary in order to define the scope of your project. Then, determine the number of operatories required, and finally, determine the square footage needs. Without the benefit of a trained designer, you may find that this is often underestimated. Here are the rules of thumb for determining the number of required operatories. One doctor and one hygienist is 4 ops. One doctor and 2 hygienists, 5 to 6 ops. 2 doctors and 2 hygienists, 7 to 8 ops. And if there are more than 2 doctors, the number of ops will depend on the volume of patients to be seen and the scheduling of the doctors. The following are rules of thumb for determining the square footage required for the building. 4 to 5 ops equals 450 to 500 square feet, usable or net, per operatory or treatment chair. 6 to 7 ops equals 425 to 475 square feet, 8 to 9, 400 to 450 square feet. You'll note that the overall square footage ratio needed for the building doesn't increase as ops are needed, because you still need the same accessory spaces for a small office as you do for a large one. Those accessory spaces, sterilization for instance, only gets slightly larger as the treatment area increases. 3 major planning criteria considerations would be: first, determine the optimal size for the office based on the items that were covered previously. Next, ensure proper placement of central sterilization and lab. And lastly, make sure all ops are designed and equipped identically. And I'll discuss the reason for this in more detail later. Next, we move to the design criteria for the public zone. I will discuss the following areas: the entrance, reception area, front desk and business area, consultation area, patient restroom, and corridors. The main entrance. The building should be oriented so that the entrance is easily visible from patient parking area. The front door should be obvious, and correct signage placement will help this. It is important to make it open and inviting with ease of access to the front desk greeting area. Provide a vestibule if the climate has any significant cold or rainy weather. For the reception area, attention to detail is key. Lighting, colors, furniture, architectural treatments, materials are all very important to establishing the level of service to be provided. And this translates to high trust and low fear. Calming and comfortable is the goal. Avoid the clinical look of repetitious chairs and low quality furnishings and materials. You do not want to be perceived as a typical doctor's office. This is a room that will get you a lot of bang for your buck, so design it accordingly. Try to get as much natural light as you can into this space and orient it to views other than the parking lot if possible. To determine the number of seats needed in reception, use this ratio: 1.5 to 2 per treatment chair for most applications, with 2 to 2.5 for ortho and pedo, because more families tend to come to the office together. Good space segregation of seating from the entry and from front desk for privacy is important. Visual access from front desk, both from staff and patient perspective, is also crucial. Reading and educational materials should be provided, but avoid having anything overly clinical out here. Save it for the consult. For the children's area, it can be a small reading area or a larger enclosed play area. Having a juice bar or coffee bar is also a consideration. It can be self-serve, set up in the reception room, or it can also be set up behind the greeter for a concierge type of service. Now let's talk about the front desk. This element is where you make your first impression on a patient, so it should have a high level of design. The slide on the right is an example of a concierge approach, where the greeter can come out from behind the desk, shake a patient's hand, offer a drink, take a coat, etc. It's important that the greeter is not closed off from the reception area with sliding glass doors. But to protect patient privacy, be aware of how sound can filter into the waiting area from checkout. For the appointments area, it needs to be adjacent to greeting but should have visual and sound separation. It should be close to the patient toilet so that it can be monitored by the staff, and should be arranged to allow direct eye contact between staff and the patient leaving the operatory corridor. Another area near appointments is the semi-private financial area. Privacy needs to be considered when locating this space. It needs to have sound and visual separation from the checkout area. It needs to have easy access for both the staff side of the appointment desk and the patient side. If more privacy is needed, then the consult room or a private business office can be used. Some jurisdictions may also require a lower counter for ADA access at the appointments desk, and sometimes this area can serve that function. You will hear the term ADA often in these presentations, and it refers to the Americans with Disabilities Act. Basically, this is what defines handicapped access to the space and can vary in interpretation from one jurisdiction to the other. The business area. This is an area that will house most of the day-to-day non-medical functions of the office. It needs to be designed with flexibility and workstation arrangement and have lots of general storage of files, charts, and office supplies. It's not recommended to have an enclosed business manager office in this area because of the floor space it requires, unless this will also be used as a secondary consult or private financial area. Typically, this space can be arranged so that it is easy to access to both the appointment desk and back business area, but still have enough privacy. In the slide on the left, you can see that it would be tucked in behind where the charts are. Consultation room is where you want to go all out with design. The wow factor will be what your patients remember and will reflect the quality of your dentistry. It needs to be near the entrance into the treatment zone and also close to the front desk. If needed, as mentioned before, it can serve as a private financial room. It is a space to be used as introduction to patients as to the quality of work they're about to receive, so it should be comfortably finished out and intimate. Determine if you want this to be an open space, easily seen by everyone as they head to the operatory corridor, or if your patients would respond better to a more private, intimate space. If you use audiovisual presentation, you will need a CPU and a large monitor in the room for educational and treatment presentation and imaging systems. Visual aid storage, models, brochures, treatment care info, etc. can usually be stored within the built-in cabinetry in the space. It can have either built-in or freestanding furniture or a combination of both. It usually depends on the number of people it needs to accommodate. Now we'll talk about the patient restroom. Believe it or not, a lot of patients might not remember your dentistry, but they will remember the restroom. It needs to be convenient from reception area, but never actually in it. It needs visual access from front desk business area so they can have control of who's going in and out. It should have a little extra design sizzle to make an impression on your patients. If other public restrooms are provided, a patient restroom may not be necessary, but then patients will need to be able to access staff restroom during their appointments. Typically, codes will require separate men's and women's toilets. This can usually be met by providing separate staff and patient toilets. In this condition, the staff toilet will then need to be accessible off of a public corridor. All public toilets in the office will need to be ADA accessible, so be aware of the extra square footage that this will require. In the operatory corridors, they need to have easy access from the reception area, but the treatment corridor needs auditory and visual separation from reception as well as checkout, if possible. Corridors are necessary for emergency egress of the space, so configuration will be influenced by building code requirements. Aesthetic design of the treatment corridor can have significant impact on the patient. Again, high trust, low fear. Often access will be needed for portable equipment, lasers, iTero, zoom whiteners, etc., and it's good to plan for a niche or closet for these items, generally off of the treatment corridor. In this next section, I'll review the design criteria for the treatment zone, which includes operatory design, central sterilization, laboratory area, central radiology, mechanical, and gases. For the operatory, you need to have efficient traffic flow in and out, and you need to have treatment systems in the preferred configuration. On the next slides, I will discuss single unit system rear delivery, over the patient delivery, dual unit, or split system. This is a graphic of a rear delivery setup. With a dual function cart and flexible rear delivery, this arrangement is highly recommended. It allows easy operatory access for the dentist, hygienist, and assistant, has complete freedom of movement for staff and patient. The cart is located in an area where neither staff nor patient walk. The cart umbilical cord is not on the floor. Again, low fear, low equipment visibility for the patient, and there's no limit to dental procedures that can be performed in any operatory space. This is a comparatively inexpensive dental equipment investment with maximum flexibility. This is an over-the-patient delivery arrangement. It's good for compact single doctor or hygiene operatories. It's not recommended when the system is used by both doctor and assistant because the assistant is forced into class 5 twisting movements. Having instruments at patient eye level can be intimidating and claustrophobic, and cords and lines drape over the patient unless a whip-back system is used, but that setup is even more intimidating. This slide shows a dual unit or split system. Side delivery units allow doctor easy access to handpieces and they are out of patient's direct view. It's more expensive than rear delivery because it adds an additional unit and requires extra utility lines to it. Wall-mounted side delivery eliminates the option of having an ambidextrous operatory. If this is a concern, then chair-mounted side delivery is preferred. Side unit installation requires that great care be taken so that it is completely under the cabinet. The side unit will require much more movement than any other system and will wear out quicker. Now we will discuss optimal ergonomic positioning in the operatory with a focus on dental assistant positioning. The operatory work zone is one area of the office where you and your assistant are the primary users. As such, your comfort is more important than the patient's. Dentistry is a repetitive operation, so care should be taken to keep those movements from causing pain and fatigue. There are basically 5 classes of movement that progress from small hand-arm activities to those requiring more body movement. Class 1, fingers. Class 2, hands. Class 3, elbows and below. Class 4, shoulders and below. And Class 5 are torso movements. The best location for the dentist in almost all cases is from the 9 o'clock to 12 o'clock position, with the knees not too widely spread. This keeps their work movements within Class 1 to 3. The assistant will be required to make larger movements, so their positioning is important as well. The standard assistant positioning is legs parallel to the back of the dental chair, hips opposite the patient's shoulders, cart or work surface in front or slightly to the left side. In this graphic, it shows a radius of work zones for the assistant and is designated Area 1, 2, and 3. Within Area 1, you have the instrument transfer zone where static and dynamic instruments are on the cart and drawer access to the auxiliary trays on the assistant side to the right. These are all mostly first-class movements. Next is Area 2. It can be reached by closing the auxiliary tray drawer and rotating the stool to the right. This area can be accessed for secondary treatment procedures such as mixing and charting, if the monitor is not on the cart, and reaching the glove dispensers on that side. These are all mostly Class 3 with some Class 4 movements. And finally, please note the extent of Area 3. It is not acceptable for instrument or equipment placement in this zone for the dental assistant. Twisting of the upper torso, Class 5 movements are required to access this area, and it can be very bad for the assistant in the long run. Next, we have a diagram of the operatory critical dimensions. Generally, it's best to try and design all of your operatories to be the same, even hygiene, so that any type of procedure can be performed. Even though they will not likely be setting up with exactly the same small equipment or drawer configurations, it will allow you ultimate flexibility for the future. For instance, say you have 3 dedicated hygiene ops that are smaller, but find your cosmetic cases have increased dramatically. Where will you be able to do these higher profit procedures if the ops are not at all the same? For standard operating environment, there are some typical dimensions that are important. A 10-foot minimum depth of room from rear wall or cabinetry to the foot of the room, 6'6" to 7'0" maximum spacing between side cabinets. 7 foot is probably best since patients are generally increasing in size. This translates to a 9'6" to a 10-foot minimum room width. 18 inches for the side cabinet depth, which can be reduced to 16 inches if needed, and 27 inches from the rear wall or cabinet to the head of the chair when fully reclined. Cabinetry considerations. Operatory cabinets should be used for storage, not for areas to keep equipment on. Maintaining a clean and uncluttered look helps reduce fear. Sinks should be at the far end of the cabinet so that you can have eye contact with the patient as you wash your hands. Also, this will leave more workspace on the assistant side to set things during procedures. Determine early on the importance of making every op ambidextrous, with both side cabinets exactly alike. This is beneficial only in cases of having a right and left-handed users that may need to use each other's ops, or if a right-handed associate is replaced with a left-handed one. Bottom line, design them for your most typical daily function that will work the best. You may consider eliminating drawers on the doctor side and creating knee space and pencil drawer setup there. Next, we will discuss the utility wall. This is the most important element of your operatory, so spend as much time as you can analyzing your work habits and research all the options. A custom-built wall can be designed to be both flexible and efficient, as well as become a design element when viewed from the corridor. By having the functions recessed into the wall, the dental equipment is hidden from patient view. It allows for effective installation of nitrous, hoses, and umbilical cords, and it also allows the flexibility for the utilities to be brought in from above or below. It allows for flexible shelving for smaller equipment, and the upper portion of the wall can accommodate the CPU and PA X-ray. Now let's consider some additional cabinetry considerations. X-ray mounting locations. Behind the patient gives the optimal location for flexibility of use by the operator and is hidden from patient view, but will not work with most prefab rear delivery units. Mounting it on the side wall is not as flexible and is not as aesthetic. It's one of the first things you see when you come into the room. Wall, ceiling, lighting issues. A low header opening between utility wall and side walls helps contain sound. Always use suspended acoustical tile in the operatories to help with sound control also. In general, provide fluorescent downlighting at the head of the patient or have suspended up and down lights to give the room full illumination. All fluorescent fixtures in the room should be equipped with color-corrected bulbs if you want to have accurate shading matching. The next topic is central sterilization. Sterilization is the next most important space in the treatment zone and needs to be designed as efficiently as possible. It should be located as equidistantly as possible from the farthest operatories and should allow for easy access into and out of it. Because of this, it is a space that can be seen by patients and should be perceived as very clean and sterile. We will review the following configurations: linear, galley, U-shaped, and L-shaped. This first image is an example of a linear sterilization setup. I'll use this slide as an example because it illustrates some basic ideas of sterilization design. However, you usually only see this configuration most often in small offices with 2 to 4 ops or in offices where space is a premium. In general, all sterilization should be designed to support the flow of contaminated to sterile. You'll see on this graphic with the counter work surface, provide for tray breakdown and trash receptacles for contaminated trash and sharps at the beginning of the process. The ultrasonic cleaner is next after breakdown, and the sink, which is next, typically marks this demarcation between clean and sterile. Although if an under-counter dishwasher or instrument drying before autoclaving is used, it may be placed adjacent to the sink. Alternatives are an ESMA unit, which is an ultrasonic with a dryer on top, a full instrument washer like a Mealy, or at a minimum provide a countertop drying area. The autoclave location is the final part of the steri process. Paper wrap drawers need to be located near this equipment. If a Statim is used, it could also be in this area, but be on a pull-out drawer. And lastly, provide 3 to 4 feet of counter past the autoclaves for tray setup area. For the upper cabinetry, at the dirty side, that can be used to store trays to be broken down. It's typically best to have tinted glass fronts so that it's easy to see what's on shelves. All shelves need to be adjustable. Upper cabinets at the clean side would be primarily for clean setup storage, and it can store additional daily consumables if needed. For the base cabinetry, for daily supply support and instrument storage, put in as many drawers as possible. Cabinets with doors are not very efficient for storage unless pull-out shelves are used. If needed, although not shown in the linear layout here, an under-counter refrigerator can be inserted in the base cabinet section of the clean side. Typical base cabinet height is 36 inches, but most jurisdictions will only allow 34 inches because of ADA requirements. This makes it difficult to get typical below-counter equipment to fit, but there are some units that will. This is a graphic showing a galley-type sterilization. It allows for a distinct separation of contaminated and sterile, one on each side. It is a good option for a pass-through when there are 2 parallel operatory corridors. If not used as a pass-through, then a storage closet can be at the end of the room. This is a layout for a U-shaped sterilization. It is a good layout for medium to large offices. and allows for more cabinet storage within the sterilization area. The sink could also be next to the ultrasonic on that side if you want to change that layout some. Here's an example of an L-shaped sterilization. And this is the best layout for an office configuration where operatory corridors are at right angles to each other, which is usually needed with 8 or more ops. It will also allow for additional storage or workstation area in the L portion of that. It will provide lots of daily support storage in the cabinetry. These are linear and galley sterilization images. The slide on the left was for 4-op, 1,500 square foot space, so it was the most logical choice for that arrangement. The galley slide on the right shows cabinet storage at the end, like I mentioned before, but the galley configuration, again, is used most often when there's a need to access the Steri-Center from both ends. Here are some U-shaped and L-shaped sterilization images. The slide on the left shows a very compact area. For U-shaped design to work best, the U leg needs a little more length so that 2 people do not get in each other's way. The L-shaped image is viewed from the opening on the long side of the L. Note that the cabinet on the right, which can serve as a computer work area and miscellaneous storage. The next section is lab design. Laboratory design is influenced by the way you practice. If you do most lab work yourself or if you have an in-house technician, then it needs to be big enough to accommodate all the different processes needed. If you send out your lab work, you may only need a small area to pour up and trim models. As technology progresses, as with the iTero and CERAC, some of this may become automated. Generally, try to locate the lab towards the back of the treatment area and within close proximity of a doctor's office. Sound attenuation is a consideration for this room. Determine lab capacity, pour up versus production, and the number of users at one time. Also determine the work surface height if you want to have it seated or standing. Note that ADA height restrictions may also be required here. In the graphic, you can see on the counter work surface, you will have a model trimmer, which needs to be adjacent to the sink, a large sink, which needs to have a plaster trap below it, a pour-up area adjacent to the sink, plaster storage in a bin above sink or in drawers next to it. To the right side of this image is the clear work area. This can be standing height if desired or seated height as shown. If you want it to be standing height, you'll need to have tall adjustable stools that have foot support rings. Next in line would be the lathe. Below the work surface is the dust collection system with fish mouth hoses that would come up through the counter, or you can have a suction drawer unit below the counter. There needs to be a continuous electrical plug mold along the splash with outlets every 12 inches or so for flexibility in locating equipment. Compressed air hookups can be above or below the counter, or both, depending on where you want the hoses to go. Small drawers for handpieces and instrument storage are all along the work area on that side. Any additional equipment, ovens, vacuum forms, hoods, etc., would also go on top of the counter. You'll have general storage supply in the upper cabinets with the doors as shown here. And for case pan storage, adjustable angled shelving is best and can be incorporated into a section of the upper cabinets or can be set up as shallow shelves from floor to 7 feet at the opposite wall or somewhere else within the room. Here are some photos of different lab layouts. Note the upper cabinet case pan storage on the bottom left side and the full height storage in the right photo. Next is central radiology, panoramic x-ray area. It's located typically near the beginning of the operatory corridor so that the patient can be processed before going to the operatories. Space requirements vary with the model. It's usually 5 feet by 5 feet. The space for that would be sufficient, or 7 foot 6 inches in width if you have a Ceph head attachment. But the room needs to be wide enough for that space and to accommodate a narrow cabinet for the CPU and keyboard. Some jurisdictions require complete enclosure of the room for x-ray protection, so be aware of how this might affect ADA clearance. Dental and mechanical gases closets. Compressor and vacuum room should be located towards the rear of the facility in a straight run from ops if possible. The gas closet needs to be on an exterior wall for ventilation and should not require going through the main part of the office in order to service the tanks. Space requirements varies with models. They can usually be stacked in a 42-inch by 42-inch closet, but soundproofing is very necessary for that closet and good ventilation is required as well. The mechanical room needs an exhaust fan that is controlled by a thermostat to get rid of the excess heat, and the gas closet will need high and low passive louvers to the outside for ventilation. Now we will review the design criteria for the private zone. In this section, I will discuss the following: the doctor's office, staff room, storage, technology, and phone systems. In the doctor's office, depending on how you practice, Time spent in the office is downtime from production. So decide how you want the space to function. Small, efficient space to catch up on paperwork, or expansive enough to relax in. So early in the design process, establish how many doctors there's going to be and if private versus shared offices are desired. Generally, it is oriented towards the back of the office to stay away from the main patient flow, and locating it near the staff area will also allow for easy access to the staff room and to the staff entry. For equipment, furnishing, and storage needs, simple built-in desk with upper and base cabinets is generally best. If doctor spends more time here or wants it to double as a consult room, then it may need to be bigger with freestanding furniture. Possible bookshelves and or coat closet can be added if desired. We often get requests to include a private doctor's office in the doctor's toilet in the doctor's office, but there are some things you need to be aware of. Some jurisdictions may allow for a powder room sized toilet directly off of the doctor's office. However, most will require the toilet to be handicapped adaptable, which means a minimum 5-foot turning circle, as well as required door clearance. In order to save on office square footage, the doctor can usually use a staff toilet, which is just located nearby. And unless you bicycle to work, avoid installing a doctor's shower because it will usually need to be designed as accessible. In our experience, these have been rarely used. Most often it ends up being an expensive square footage where you store extra toilet paper. For the staff room, this space should be towards the back of the building also, but oriented so that the staff can have direct access from the parking lot. This is the entrance that is used when opening up the office for the day and closing down at the end. Do not locate the staff restroom within this space. Instead, locate it off a corridor that leads to the break room. And if possible, locate this space so that it does have a direct back door connection into the business area. And if you want to have the space doubled as a study club meeting area, it's good for it to have its own entrance. Storage. In most offices, the old adage of you can never have enough storage is generally true. So as you lay out all the functionality of the office, trying to get in everything you need for your practice, be sure and plan in the storage as well. For clinical storage, there are 3 distinct levels. There's daily storage, which includes consumables, handpieces, etc. that are stored or replenished during the day. It needs to be easily accessed within the sterilization space or an adjacent area. Weekly storage includes larger boxes of materials not yet broken down to put into daily storage, and this can sometimes be in the sterilization area, but most likely part of bulk storage. And last, there's bulk storage, where large boxes of materials are to be stored prior to breaking down into smaller units. It is also a storage area for outside delivery or other bulky items. Business storage is also important because you'll need to store paper goods and office supplies. So it's best if that is located in or near the business area and can generally be accommodated in the upper cabinets of the business area or even in the lower cabinets if they're in there too. Also, and not mentioned on the slide, is cleaning supplies, dry goods storage, and miscellaneous storage. With the former, it can be stored in the janitor's closet, which is also a typically code-required space. For dry goods storage, most of that can be kept in the cabinetry within the space where it's needed. For any other storage that isn't accessed as often, the attic or the basement is sufficient. If you're in a space that doesn't have either one of those, be sure and allow a little extra in your bulk storage area. Next, we'll talk about technology and phone systems design criteria. The modern dental office is heavily reliant on the latest technology. With digital x-rays, digital charting, and digital records, your tech system is the backbone of your office. Hire a professional early on to assist you in determining what your current and most important, your future needs will be. Design the technology phone system so that it can be easily accessed when it needs to be repaired or expanded. With the amount of digital data typically being processed, a central server is usually necessary. It needs to be located in an easily accessed, non-public area that is well ventilated. Each operatory will likely need its own CPU and monitor configuration. Great care should be taken to ensure that this system integrates seamlessly and invisibly. So don't have your computer sitting on the floor in the corner. And finally, determine how staff and public will interact with the internet, firewalls, Wi-Fi access, satellite radio, on-demand media, etc., and have the system designed appropriately. That ends the presentation on planning criteria for the dental office. A strong word of advice that I want to leave you with is that whatever aspirations you may have for designing your own office, you should never try to go it alone. Enlist the best team of trained professionals available because you do not want to have to sacrifice your time doing what you do best to try and do something that others are better at.